Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, Embodied Health and Hypermobile Movement. I'm Shauna, a certified health coach, personal trainer, registered yoga teacher, Pilates and training, hypermobile ADHD, all that fun stuff. In today's video, I want to talk about two of the primary issues that hypermobile people face when it comes to adjusting their posture, and that has to do with both the pelvis and the shoulders. Oftentimes I see people overcompensating by either engaging their glutes as a way to adjust their pelvis or pulling their shoulder blades down and back as a way to sit up straight or stand up straight. And all of these things, unfortunately, tend to exacerbate pain and issues. The two things I'm going to show you today are how to control your lower abdominals, or an exercise that will help you start learning how to control your lower abdominals, which will help you adjust your pelvic posture. And the other is thoracic extension, which is going to help you stop sitting like a C, sit up a little bit more straight, and do that without pulling on your shoulder blades and creating additional tension in an area that we already have enough problems, let's be honest. And so with that, I'm going to do a deep dive on two separate moves. The first are traditional pelvic tucks. This is for the lower abdominals, or really the full deep core, but also the lower abdominals. And the second is going to be a move that I call the Titanic, which is a variation of thoracic extension to help strengthen the thoracic area of the spine. Let's get into it. The supporting characters of this exercise are the Fab Five of your deep core. That's your multifidus, transverse abdominis, pelvic floor, diaphragm, and internal obliques. Your multifidus is interwoven through the vertebrae of your spine and is your posterior deep core. Your transverse abdominis is what most people think of with the deep core. It's the corset muscle attaching at the base of your ribs, wrapping all the way around the top of your pelvis. And the pelvic floor to hold things in, urine, but also internal organs. The diaphragm, also one of your primary respiratory muscles. And keep in mind, the diaphragm, it's like an umbrella. And as it opens, that's the contraction. That's when it's getting stronger. So we want to try to open it as much as we can on our inhale. And then as we exhale, bringing it back together, closing the umbrella, that's the relaxation of that umbrella, the diaphragm. And then the internal obliques, helping to pull things down and in from the rib cage. I like to think of these as suspenders, attaching ribs to pelvis, helping keep us laterally stable. Those are supporting characters in this exercise, meaning that their primary job is to stabilize us, stabilize our spine, and stabilize our pelvis for a majority of the movement. The main character, which is both a stabilizer and a mover, is our rectus abdominis. And this is that muscle that runs along the top. It's what most people think of the six-pack abs or eight-pack. This attaches from sternum down to pubic bone. And I want you to take particular note of those last couple of blocks below the belly button attaching at that pubic symphysis. This is where, if we can learn to control these muscles right here, we can control our pubic bone, and that means that we can adjust our posture into and out of anterior and posterior tilting with our abdominals alone. And so if you look at the direction of these muscle fibers, the way that everything runs, as this muscle contracts, it's going to shorten, which means it's going to bring the pubic bone closer to the rib cage, or put the pelvis in more of a posterior tilt. And so this exercise is intended to help us learn how to recognize, use, and strengthen those muscles, and then learn how to use those muscles to control our pelvis without engaging our glutes like so many of us do to adjust our posture when we're standing up. Let me show you the traditional move along with some modifications and adjustments. This was filmed last week, I want to say. A traditional pelvic tuck is done supine in constructive rest pose with your feet flat on the floor, parallel to one another and about hips distance apart or a little bit closer. Your arms should be resting straight at your side with your palms facing the ceiling if you can. This provides an external rotation to the shoulder, which we want to do because an internally rotated shoulder is a more active shoulder, and we don't want to be holding any tension in this area if possible. To start, inhale into the back of your open throat, sending your tummy toward the ceiling and your back toward the floor as your side body lengthens. We're feeling for an expansion of the transverse abdominis, internal obliques, diaphragm, multifidus, pelvic floor, and rectus abdominis. All those core muscles we talked about in part one. Let your shoulders sink into the surface below you, trying not to hold your tension in those muscles running from your skull down the side of your neck to the top of your scapula. And then as you exhale, pull your back towards your belly, beginning to compress and shorten all those core muscles, hugging everything toward your spine as you gently pull up and in on your pelvic floor. It should feel like you're bracing to be tickled while you really have to urinate. And to get into the tuck, continue the shortening and compression of the rectus abdominis to pull your pubic bone closer to your rib cage. This is going to create a little bit of flexion in your lumbar spine, bringing it closer to that surface below you. And then go ahead and inhale, slowly releasing the muscle tension, coming out of the tuck and back into a neutral position. You'll want to repeat this process, moving with your breath. And yes, it's totally normal if this does not feel at all natural. And even for as long as I've been doing this, it can still take me a few repetitions to get my mind-body connection solidified and recruit those muscles in the right way. Let me show you some modifications and adjustments. The first is a modification for proprioception and interoception. This is if you're really struggling to determine if you're actually compressing that rectus abdominis muscle from sternum down to pubic bone. And so what you can do is bring your hands toward the bottom of your ribs, and then as you exhale, use your hands to feel for the ribs closing toward one another and a shortening and compression of that muscle as opposed to a loafing or popping up through your hands. Another modification for proprioception and interoception is putting your hands on your lower abdominals. Just create a triangle, bringing your pointer fingers and your thumbs together. Rest your palms on your lower abdomen and bring your pointer finger to your pubic bone. And same thing, you can use this to help you feel for that engagement all the way down through that pubic symphysis, which is where we're going to be looking for that activation and that pulling up to get into that pelvic tuck. If you still find that you're using your glutes, your quads, or your hip flexors to do the work, meaning you can feel yourself pushing into the surface below you or any tension in your lower body, go ahead and put your legs straight. And if it's comfortable, you can also do a slight internal rotation of your legs, which will definitely help turn your glutes off. You'll do the move the exact same way, and you can combine this with, putting your hands on your ribs, lower abdominals, whatever else you may need. The next adjustment is prone, lying on your stomach. This is great if lying on your back is uncomfortable for any reason. You can put your forehead on your hands or on a pillow, whatever helps you to stay loose enough in your shoulders that you're not holding any tension, but feel like you're able to support yourself. And I recommend a slight internal rotation of your legs if you're able to. This will also help to turn your glutes off so that you don't compensate and squeeze your glutes to tuck your pelvis instead of using your abdominals. This can also help if you struggle to expand your belly as you inhale. Gravity works in our favor, so as we expand, we can push our belly into the floor. It helps with proprioceptive input as well, giving us that feedback that we're doing it correctly. The next modification is to do this sitting up. This is my least favorite option just because so many of us struggle to sit up as it is, and so we're thinking about holding our body together in a seated position and then also trying to engage these muscles, but not everybody's able to lie down on the floor. And so it's important to at least give you the information for this one. So if this is your only option, here's how to do it. You want to make sure that your feet are level. Same rule, about hips distance apart or a little bit closer to one another. My recommendation is to lie your palms on the tops of your thighs, kind of by your knees or wherever is comfortable, just based on your arm length. Your hand should slide along your thigh just the slightest bit as you get into that posterior tuck, and then is going to slide the other direction as you go back into neutral. Definitely make sure that you're not arching your lumbar spine here. So we're going neutral to posterior. We're not arching our low back and going into an anterior tilt. And the other thing that keeping your hands flat on your legs can do is help you to make sure that you're staying long in your neck and shoulders. So as you're inhaling and exhaling, making sure that you're keeping lots of space between your shoulders and your ears, really breathing into your neck and your throat. And try not to move your neck while you do this. This is really a movement of just the lumbar spine and our abdominals. We don't want to be flexing and extending our neck every time we're exhaling and inhaling. The next is an adjustment that is also, again, proprioception and interoception. You can put a yoga block between your feet to help you maintain your alignment throughout the movement. We don't want to push into the block or anything like that. We're just using it for proprioceptive awareness so that we just stay where we are and we don't let our legs kind of drift apart. And the last adjustment I have for you is to prop your pelvis, or more specifically, prop your sacrum. What we're looking to do is put the pelvis in more of a natural posterior tilt without us having to use our muscles to engage it. Here's why. If you have an anterior tilt, your abdominals are lengthened and weak. But if you have a posterior tilt, your abdominals are shortened and weak. And so this exercise will be difficult for either tilt, but it tends to be more difficult for posterior because you have to work to both lengthen your abdominals and strengthen them. And so by propping something under your sacrum and helping to put your pelvis in that naturally tucked position, you're going to make it easier for your body to start recruiting muscles because you're putting your abdominals in that shortened position that they prefer. And so instead of having to fight against that lengthening that's already going to be a struggle without having your pelvis propped, you're eliminating that challenge and allowing yourself to just recruit the muscles. Last, it's really important that we try to keep our neck and our throat loose while we're doing all of this work. And so something that you can do is make a slight hissing sound as the exhale leaves your throat. This is going to help you connect with that muscle exertion and also just help you get into a rhythm. So inhaling into your open throat and then exhaling. Let's move into the second portion of being able to hold better posture, which is thoracic extension, being able to use our thoracic stabilizers instead of our shoulders or any other muscle to help hold us up or to keep us from falling forward. I've already shown a traditional version of thoracic extension done prone on the floor in my shorts. You can find that linked in the description. However, for a variety of reasons, that traditional movement is not accessible for a lot of people. That's why what I'm going to show you is a different version where we can use these muscles without straining and stressing a lot of the common problem areas that I find for people when it comes to the traditional movement. Let's start with the anatomy of the move. The spine is made up of 5 primary sections. The cervical section, 7 vertebrae. The thoracic section, 12 vertebrae. The lumbar section, 5 vertebrae. And then you have the sacral and coccyx. I can't say that word right. And these are fused together. So there's 5 fused in the sacral and 4 in the coccyx. This is a side view. This is the back. This is the front. We have a number of stabilizer muscles that run along the back of our vertebrae, weaving all in between. So this also means that we can have sections of this long muscle that are either lengthened or short. For example, if you have forward head posture, rounded shoulders, just a lot of flexion in your thoracic spine for any reason, this section of the muscle is very likely lengthened and weak. In order to improve posture, we need to strengthen these deep stabilizer muscles in the thoracic area of our spine so that we can better extend through this area as opposed to flexing and falling forward. The primary muscle that we're working for this is our multifidus. And remember, this is one of our 5 deep core muscles. It's responsible for posterior stability. This is one of our primary stabilizers for our spine, meaning when we are supposed to sit up straight, these are the muscles we want to initially be activating, not using our shoulder blades to pull us back. But many of us don't know how to use these muscles and they weren't developed properly, so it's not your fault. And remember, the smaller the muscle, the smaller the amount of resistance, which is why we're never going to go beyond our body weight when we're just specifically looking at working these deep stabilizer muscles. As I show you the movement, I want you to envision, this is Spinny's laying on the floor, face down, face planting. I want you to envision this part of your thoracic spine, your shoulder blades are on either side. You're just trying to gently lift right here by using and shortening these muscles. So you're just creating the slightest bit of shortening and lifting like this. Nothing in the cervical spine is moving. Nothing in the lumbar spine is moving. Now that I've given you an idea of the muscles that we should be working and where we're supposed to be working it, I'm going to show you a move I called the Titanic. We're going to get started on our knees using the exercise ball. We're going to lean up against this. Normally I would put the ball against a wall, but for the purposes of filming, we're going to use the bench. So you want to be, I don't know, not right up against the ball. And then toes active, so toes tucked underneath. And we're gonna put our weight into the ball on our tummy and just kind of be relaxed here. And then on your exhale, you're going to find abdominal engagement, gently tucking your pubic bone toward the ball. And if you feel you're not fully supported, we're gonna move the ball back. So as I exhale and I draw my abdominals in, I'm walking into, pushing into the ball to stabilize me. And I'm nice and loose up through my neck and shoulders right now. And on my next exhale, I'm gonna bring my arms straight at my side, micro bend in the elbows. And right here, I'm not pulling my arms away. I'm not forcing them up. Hi, son. I'm just letting them float away using my shoulder blades to pull against. And then on my next exhale, I'm going to gently lift up a teeny tiny bit, holding that tuck. And so right now, it's just those thoracic extensor muscles working and some of our back extensors and rotator cuff muscles, everything firing up on this isometric contraction, trying to keep my neck a little bit loose here, and then release it. You can adjust in a way that works for you. If that's still too low for you, do it up higher. So get started, make sure you're nice and secure, and you can hold it. The ball doesn't want to hold me with the bench here. We can hold it like this. So pushing in, head above heart, tucking my low back. So what I'm using to hold myself up straight, rotator cuff muscles and thoracic extensors here. And now you can see why it's called the Titanic. One of the reasons I really like this instead of the traditional move on the floor is because we relieve a lot of neck tension by holding ourselves at this position as opposed to putting our head horizontal and then having to hold it up. And so it's a little bit easier, I find, for people who have particular neck issues to be able to stabilize without creating a lot of additional pain and tension in the neck in this type of position, as opposed to down on the floor and trying to raise up without creating that negative movement pattern that is so natural. The other thing I like about this is it keeps the head above the heart. So if you do struggle with, POTS, or for any other reason you get lightheaded and you need your head above your heart, this is a great option. You can, of course, do this against a bed, a bench, an ottoman. It does not have to be an exercise ball. Just to give you an idea, we're still going to tuck the pelvis because we want to make sure we've got that nice engagement. And then we're just going to lift up and we're going to hold it here. You don't have to do the arms. You can just do the thoracic extension. Let your arms hang. Just my thoracic spine working. Now I've got back extensors, rotator cuff muscles working. Thank you. And then release it. Another thing I like about this version rather than the traditional method from the floor is whenever we are down and we're extending through our thoracic spine and then we move our arms away from our body in this direction, we immediately are activating our latissimus dorsi. And so as soon as we pull like this, we're putting ourselves in a position where we may create tension at the low back and just make it more difficult for us to keep that safer lumbar position with that gentle tuck, because as we pull out, our lats may want to pull our pelvis the opposite direction. So I find this to be safer and easier for reducing low back pain and making sure that we're not getting into those overactive latissimus muscles or the elevator muscles, which again, as soon as we go to move our arms this direction away from us, we can get into those elevators when we don't want to, creating tension and preventing us from getting the kind of muscle activation and isolation that we're looking for. I think the only downside to the Titanic is it can be harder to isolate what that movement feels like to translate it into daily life. And so if I say to you, instead of sitting like this, give me thoracic extension, which is just pushing back, it's a little harder to learn that if we don't have the arms out with the shoulder blades, but it's not impossible and it is often safer. So I recommend starting with something like the Titanic, and then if you can, building up to being able to do some version of the traditional with the arms a little further away from the body so that you can really focus on lifting that thoracic spine through the shoulder blades. Not literally through, but that's the direction we're going. That's a wrap on pelvic tucks and the Titanic to help you adjust your posture. I hope this was helpful. Please let me know in the comments if it was, what you want to see next time, or just what you're up to.